Impressive voice guy speaks. I then get to jump on the program after that. One more day of substitute teachering. Not for me, I guess, the only day I have to do this week. You had Derek Schultz yesterday. You get me this afternoon. My name is Greg Rakestraw. Hello, how are you? Jake Query is literally on a transatlantic flight back as we speak, or at least he is scheduled to be, which means you get to hear from him tomorrow, and he can regale you with all of the tales of Vienna, some of the more somber places he has visited, as well as our friend is nothing if not a student of civilization, culture, and history, or things somewhat related to that. And so you get me, Greg Rakestraw, filling in for one more day here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Kind of back to like the normal rhythm and routine of things that we talk about. Going into a Colts bye, it kind of allowed us to expand our palate a little bit. Obviously, I had the Monon Bell, which was another glorious afternoon in Crawfordsville on Saturday. Really enjoyed the broadcast. A lot of positive feedback. Thank you so much for those of you that did that. Viewing numbers off the charts for that game, as they basically are each and every year. DePaul won. Congratulations. Wabash plays in a small college bowl game. They have those now coming up this weekend. DePaul gets the weekend off. If you were at the game, want to talk about the broadcast, the game, etc., feel free to do that. 317-239-1070 at Greg Rakestraw in terms of Twitter, or you can even old school email the program to greg@1070thefan.com. I think it still works. Honestly, I'm not sure, but I think it does, and that's close enough. But I talked about like IU Indy basketball. We talked more about IU football, and that conversation will carry over on the program today. Zach Osterman will be joining us in the neighborhood of 1:30. And again, the Indiana University football conversation is still fascinating to me. Like, there's literally like a different factoid or nugget or note that you can share every day that just leaves you slack-jawed at how things are progressing for Indiana University football. There was a couple of those yesterday that I wanted to bring to the table, and we'll do so here in the opening segment of the show before we kind of revisit this during the 1 o'clock hour of the program. The current active longest home winning streak in FBS football belongs to the Indiana Hoosiers. They basically have swept their home games for the last 2 seasons. Played 8 last year, won them all. Played 7 this year, won them all. I may have had those numbers backwards, but I think that's the way that worked out. I know the number is 15. With Alabama being beaten at home by Oklahoma this weekend, the longest home winning streak in FBS football belongs to the Indiana Hoosiers, the team that was the losingest major college football program in North America, the world champions of the world at that. The Indiana Hoosiers now have the longest active home winning streak. The other thing, and Zach wrote about this yesterday, is the fact that if you look at the odds makers, not the prohibitive favorite, but the current Heisman favorite. Now, frankly, and I'm not sure if I will ever more sound like Jake than I'm about to for the next 30 seconds. Because since I see Jake every Tuesday morning, I think I'm kind of like the warm-up act for Jake's show, like he tries out his opening monologue on me, basically, by checking the boxes of the things that he wants to talk about, like complaining about Eddie. Only kidding about that a little bit. But in terms of one of the things that Jake has observed as a man that is in his 50s, and I am rounding into that territory in the not-too-distant future, would be the amount of attention/knowledge that the generation after us, of which Eddie would be a part of, has about gambling and wagering. Like, us middle-aged dudes think we have some knowledge of gambling. We ain't got squat compared to the generation after us because, frankly, it has been far more of a thing. It is far easier to do. I thought Zach did a great job in his article yesterday of saying he's not a favorite, but if you notice, he is in negative numbers. In other words, you'd have to wager more than 100 to get $100 back, which makes him the favorite. Like, if you're the favorite in a horse race There's still probably a better in most races than 75, 80% champion. A horse named Not You. Like if any of you were actually in a horse race, I doubt you were. I'm not sure I made the analogy that direction. You get the point. You can be the favorite, 80% chance you're not going to win the race. Somewhat similar here for Mendoza. But we have a Heisman Trophy favorite that has one more regular season game left to go against Purdue next Friday night. Has the Big Ten championship game left to go, and that's it before the Heisman Trophy would be awarded to an Indiana University football player. Another thing that we kind of touched on last week, and I kind of pushed it and I wouldn't say kicked it to the curb, but you know what? I think this topic will stand until we get to Tuesday. The other thing that I'm having a tough time wrapping my brain around is just how many Indiana football players hear their name called by Roger Goodell and or others the last weekend in April in the NFL draft. Clearly, Mendoza will be tops among that list, but it's not like it's just him. I think there's a lot of guys on that Indiana roster, not necessarily first-round picks. This isn't like, the U 20 years ago, where like a quarter of the first round are guys that played at the University of Miami. But maybe I'm not sure there's another first-round pick. Might be somebody else going in second and third round. A lot of guys that hear their name on the third day of the draft. So those are the topics that we'll get to coming up with Zach a little bit later on in the program. There is always what we do in Sports Talk Radio, and that is react to what happened in sports the night before. And what I say about the Indiana Pacers today will resonate with what I said about the Indiana Pacers on Friday's show after trying to watch as much of Thursday's game as possible. Man, that is a difficult watch. And again, because you know how good it was. We're not hearkening back to, man, they just don't make players like they used to. No, we're going to the Wayback Machine like 5 months. It is still less than 5 months ago that the Indiana Pacers, as we knew and loved them, were tipping off Game 7 of the NBA Finals. And we thought even in Oklahoma City, hell, they're going to win it. And now I can tell you, and I put this out on the Twitter sphere earlier today when I said there's two topics, one being IU football and the other being this one, that have been kind of rattling around in my brain as my talk show host brain has kind of been re-engaged over the course of the last few days. And that is with 68 games left the season, what in the hell is there left to play for the Indiana Pacers? Because, yes, I know you're getting pieces back. You got Benedict Mathurin back last night, and that's better than not having him, but it's going to take a little minute to kind of, shake off the ring rust. You can kind of see that with T.J. McConnell. But especially when you have played for so much in just the recent past, I think it will get better at some point in time, but I'm not sure it's going to get better enough to really be a difference maker. Because now you have Neesmith out a month. Obi Toppin is still a couple of months away from coming back. You know you're not getting Tyrese Halliburton that year. To paraphrase Rick Pitino, Miles Turner ain't walking through that door to kind of make the pieces fit. And there's a lot of different ways that I will kind of go on this topic. I actually did something kind of scary and did like some show research this morning. I certainly saw Eddie's eyebrows raise the moment that I said it. We do that around here? Yes, occasionally it is okay to do those things around here. Pacers battled to some degree last night. Man, I know what the final score was. What was it? 128, 112, somewhere in that neighborhood. Don't have it right in front of me. But you get the general idea. I made it to about the 2-minute mark of the second quarter. I literally taped the game, went back, watched this morning, and I was like, all right, that's enough of this. I think I have a general idea as to what we're going to talk about. So there's 2 or 3 different paths that I kind of want to take in terms of the Pacers. And one of them I will probably save for the next segment of the show. But one I will get into right now. And, as I kind of looked at things last night, you go, all right, this season's not going anywhere. But what you do have is the unique ability to get a very talented piece that you normally would not have the access to, and perhaps that is the plug and play 5 that you need, because obviously it seems like what the Pacers have at the 5 spot isn't exactly what they need long term. So in looking at the Pacers' salaries, and there's a variety of websites that you can use to do this. My personal favorite is Hoops Hype. This is where I tend to go in terms of reading what salaries are going to look like. Eddie, you want to wager as to how many current Pacers are under contract for next season?
All but Benedict Mathurin, right?
Pretty much hit the nail on the head. There are, if you included Benedict Mathurin's qualifying offer and not including a player on a 2-way contract, the Indiana Pacers have 13 players under contract for next year. And again, this was done with the idea of, hey, you loved what you did last year. Run it back as much as you can. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. What you did not know was the injury to Tyrese Halliburton and then the catastrophic chain of events that would happen, at least in terms of this season. I am very much on team run it back. I'm very much on, hey, and again, I'll give Dustin Pirak the credit for this because I saw it via his Twitter account last week. This has turned into a gap year for the Indiana Pacers. I'll make a JMV-like reference. Maybe Jake would appreciate this as well. Eddie, this will go completely over your head, so don't even try. This is the episode of Dallas where Bobby Ewing steps out of the shower, and the entire previous year was just a dream. This has been a nightmare, and I'm not sure it's going to get any better for the Indiana Pacers between now and early April. But you say, okay, do you look at moving pieces whose contracts expire? Here are the list of Pacers players whose contracts expire. Monte Morris, just signed him. Tony Bradley, a rotational piece. James Wiseman, no longer on the team. Quentin Jackson, 2-way. Talon Peters, actually back next year on a 2-way deal. Ray J. Dennis on a 2-way deal. Robinson Earl, who for some reason is getting minutes. Mac McClung and Cody Martin. Those are the guys whose contracts are the Pacers owe them $0 at the end of the year. Siakam's here for 2 more years after this one. Tyrese is here for 3 more years after this one. Actually, more. Nembhard is here for 2 more years after this one. Same with Obi Toppin. You just extended Nesmith. TJ McConnell is here for at least 2 years, and you've got a team option for a 3rd. Isaiah Jackson, 2 more years after this one. Jarris Walker still has 1 more year before he even hits his qualifying offer, which is the same thing as Ben Shepherd. You've got Jay Huff under contract for another year, plus a team option after that. Not sure why. We have even been robbed of the opportunity to see a player like Johnny Furphy develop because of his injury. And he's been unable to play since the opening day or week of the season. We haven't seen Cam Jones play yet for this team because of injury. So then you go, all right, if there are no pieces that you can move or no pieces that you want to move, like the thought would be, okay, maybe you look at sending away a player who is not going to be back next year or is under a contract for next year. Get a serviceable piece, get an extra draft pick, whatever the case may be. You don't have that guy. So really what this turns into, and again, this is a tough slog to do over the course of 68 games. You're looking at the things like the development of Jarris Walker. You're looking at things like Benedict Mathurin. Is he a guy that you want to invest in going forward? Frankly, because of this year's record and now getting into luxury tax and things like that, the financial realities may be you're not going to invest in him going forward, but maybe if things had stayed together, you would have. And so, frankly, the development of Matherin, of Walker, and eventually Furphy, those are the things that kind of have my interest. Everything else, I'm not that fired up about. So now we get to kind of the next element that maybe is on your Pacers radar. But frankly, this has nothing to do with the actual Indiana Pacers season itself. And that is we are on number one pick watch. Or that is we are on whatever the best big man available for the Indiana Pacers might be. And let me explain why I made that transition. Okay? If, and I think this is the way that I would play it if I'm Kevin Pritchard, if I'm Chad Buchanan, if I'm everybody involved with the Pacers front office. Tyrese Halliburton's here long-term. Pascal Siakam is here long-term. Aaron Nesmith is here long-term. Obi Toppin is here for 2 more years. Really the only guy of your rotation that you are questioning in terms of will he be a Pacer next year is Benedict Matherin. And frankly, it may not be related to how he plays. It may be just straight dollars and cents of it. So you feel like you've got your one. I don't include Nembhard in there. Nembhard is a guy that clearly is going to be here long term. In other words, you kind of have your one set. You kind of have your 2 set. That might be the one piece. If you're not sure what you have in Jarris Walker, if you don't think Benedict Matherin is going to be around, maybe you could use depth the 2. But you kind of know what your 3 looks like, and you kind of know what your 4 looks like. You know what your 5 looks like right now, and that ain't so good. And so now, and you have the gift of time on this, because this I don't think is going to change. But now as you get ready for the draft, you're not in a position, and this is more NFL parlance than it is NBA kind of conversation, but I do think it applies to the Indiana Pacers. You could almost hear Mel Kiper's voice saying the word reach, right? When it comes to prognosticating a draft. If you're the Pacers, you clearly have a very specific need. If you have invested in Tyrese Halliburton, in Pascal Siakam, in Aaron Nesmith, in Andrew Nembhard, in Obi Toppin, etc., what's the position you don't have much in the way of dollars and cents invested in right now? You got bodies, but I'm not sure you got anybody that can actually play. It's the center position, right? Now, being a center these days in the NBA is a different ask than what it was even 5-10 years ago. Like Isaiah Jackson plays the 5. That dude's like 6'8". Okay? So if you're the Indiana Pacers, whatever pick you get in the draft, which could be the number 1 pick all time, which the Pacers have never had, have the first overall pick in the NBA draft. And if you are the type of person that your MO or your mindset is you would win the lottery but bitch about the taxes, I think this is even foolproof for you, okay? As long as the Indiana Pacers have a pick in like the top 4 or 5, and it does not seem, and again, we just started the college basketball season. This is very much subject to change. We may feel differently in February or March about this than we do in the middle of November. But it doesn't appear there is one dominant player at the top of the food chain in terms of the NBA draft. But if you're the Indiana Pacers, wouldn't the best 4 or 5 make sense in terms of this is the way to right the wrong of whatever side of the blame game you want to play of Miles Turner walking out the door? If you've invested in all of those other spots, and the names that will be thrown around will be Cameron Boozer, who is Carlos's son, who is thought to be a pretty skilled player, not the best of athletes, and about 6'9". Caleb Williams, I hope I'm saying his name right, Chris Senack, those are the names in terms of power forward centers of 4-5s. And let's face it, every 5 is expected to be able to knock down a 3. Jay Huff can do that. I'm not so sure he can actually guard anybody. And if you look at the points being scored against the Indiana Pacers, it seems that having a rim protector might be something the Indiana Pacers would actually like to invest in. Because the one that they had is now playing for the Milwaukee Bucks. And defensively, the Indiana Pacers haven't exactly been setting the world on fire. So, depending on the show or the time of day you've been listening to Pacers Conversation, you're on your home of the Pacers, 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. It has oscillated back and forth from there is no way any team could survive the amount of injuries that the Indiana Pacers have had to, yes, that's true, but they should be playing better. The longer this goes, I think we have gotten to the part of this conversation where it's the overlapping circles. Yes, there is an asterisk to this Indiana Pacers season, and a big one, because of not just Tyrese Halliburton's injury. I firmly believe in my heart of hearts that if the Pacers would have been healthy, other than Tyrese, they could be a playoff team. Now, 14 games in, I think there is no way in the world this group is a playoff team. And more about the cratering effect of this season and some historical reference for that coming up in the next segment of the show. But as a Pacers fan, if you have the heart, the affinity for the team to be watching every night, he didn't have a choice. He gets a paycheck. He's listening and watching every night, and I think I can see hair leaving the back of his head because of that. I'm just kidding. Your quaff looks fine, my man. You're going to be just fine. I don't want Olivia to get all concerned, when I bring that up. But if you can bear with this, I think help will be here in 26 and 27 on multiple fronts. I would not be blowing up the team. It's going to be a long year. But what you should be doing as a Pacers fan, you want to watch the development of Benedict Mathurin. You want to watch the development of Jarris Walker. You want to watch the development of Johnny Furphy. And 2 of them dudes have barely played because of injury. The one guy that has played hasn't looked great. But to me, that in terms of the current roster is what has my attention. And then you are all of a sudden thinking you may get a top 3. You may get the top 1. You may get a top 3, top 5 pick. And again, you could argue about potential need at the 2. But I really believe that wherever the Pacers pick in that pecking order, it is more along the lines of give me the best big available, because that is by far the most glaring need that this team has. Other than the obvious of, it'd sure be nice to have a healthy Tyrese Halliburton out there. Also on the show today, in fact, our first guest of 3 that we'll have will be Stephen Holder. Colts bye week is over. The Colts gauntlet is about to begin. I'll try to get to that coming up in, say, the 12:45 segment. But I want to get back to the Pacers in the next segment of the show. And as we owe you a commercial break, I'm going to regale you briefly with a story from my childhood. And again, this might be a little long in the tooth for Eddie. Maybe when he was walking the halls of Decatur Central or getting a restroom break in between classes, perhaps he would have seen on a stall for a good time call, and it's somebody's number. I'm not sure if that was a thing when Eddie was a student 5 to 10 years ago at DC. One time in a chair, because at Lanesville you had some combined classes. We were just a little bit bigger than a one-room school. So I took French class and a chemistry lab because it was the same teacher doing both. And we had like these wooden stools. And on the top of the stool, it said, for a good lecture, and it gave my phone number. Maybe a precursor of what my career was going to be some 30-plus years later. Well, I don't think the next segment will be a lecture. I'm looking at you, Idaho. That's a very specific Al Gore SNL reference for those of you keeping score at home. I don't think it's a lecture, but maybe if I wasn't doing this, I think it would have been a history teacher and a coach. So I will be giving you a bit of a history lesson. And are you ready? Eddie, make sure this is being recorded, because I think this is such a good professional radio tease that this may need to go in a museum of some form. Are you ready? I will even count down on live radio.
I'll make sure to submit it for Marconi, too.
Please, at least a regional Emmy, something along those lines, okay? I'm even going to count down to make it easier for you. Here we go. In 3, 2, 1. When we come back from this next break, I will tell you why you can put Tyrese Halliburton in a group with Wilt Chamberlain, Oscar Robertson, Michael Jordan, Shaquille O'Neal, and LeBron James. That's after the break on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Tyrese Halliburton is more than an all-star. He is up with some of the greats in the NBA for what his team is doing without him after making an NBA Finals. If you could open your notebooks to page 27 and write this down, I would greatly appreciate that. Eddie, go ahead and get a pen out so you can write this down. That way Jake can use this on the show. I was just kidding about that, by the way. Feel free, though, to follow along if you would. So the Pacers are now 1-13, and one of the stats that maybe you caught wind of, because you'll see these in snippets on social media, articles written wherever you get your Pacers information from, listening to Chris and Quinn and JJ on FanDuel Sports Network, listening to Mark and Eddie right here on the Elevance Health Radio Network and on the Fan. But you kind of catch these things in drips and drabs. And one of those is that the Pacers 1-13 start now matches the 1-13 start of the Milwaukee Bucks after they made the NBA Finals in the 73-74 season. The Celtics beat the Bucks in 7. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was still on the Bucks in 74-75. Oscar Robertson had retired. And so things started not to go as well for the Bucks. Kareem wanted out. He played 1 year in Milwaukee, was traded to L.A. That Bucks team started 1-13, but, and this would give you a glimmer of hope, rallied to finish 38-44. But they were not a playoff team. And so the way that my mind wonders, having now been in the business nearly for 30 years at this point, is, all right, historically, what are examples of a team being so close to winning an NBA championship? The one I just gave kind of runs parallel. The Bucks lost in 7 to the Celtics in 74, and the next year missed the playoffs. Started 1-13, but did win 38 games, which honestly, Pacers fans, is like the last thing you want. If you are going to be bad, you want to be historically bad, in theory, to give you the best possible player you can get next year in the NBA draft. Hope it's a 1-year dip. Tyrese Halliburton comes back, all the pieces come back, and voila, you are back to being an Eastern Conference / NBA contender. The other example that, again, if you're my age, you remember, is the Spurs in the mid-90s. We'll get there, either in this segment or in the next segment. So believe it or not, as somebody else was filling in for Jake on his other show that he does on Query and Schultz, which is filmed on Tuesday mornings at Hoagies and Hops, Zach Kiefer was doing that. I just kind of hung in the background. And I said, I've got about an hour just to kind of sit here and process some things. How about actually I look some stuff up, knowing I'm doing the talk show today? So I started scrolling through the list of NBA champions. At first, it was to see kind of who had the worst season after not necessarily winning an NBA championship, because fortunately the Pacers didn't, but at least making an NBA championship. And I started to notice a remarkable trend. And if nothing else, this can be Tyrese Halliburton's pick-me-up for the day as to the company he is keeping when teams absolutely crater after making an NBA final. So my first example would be the 1964-65 San Francisco Warriors. You probably better know them now as Golden State. In 63-64, the San Francisco Warriors ended up being the NBA runners-up, and it was the 60s, so of course they lost to the Celtics in the NBA Finals. Well, in the middle of the 64-65 season, the Warriors were in financial trouble. They traded Wilt Chamberlain back to Philadelphia in the 76ers. After making the NBA Finals, the San Francisco Warriors went 17-63 and did not make the playoffs. Again, I give you the example of the Milwaukee Bucks in 1974, losing Game 7, open a season 1-13. Oscar Robertson no longer playing in the NBA. Kareem was on that team, but the Big O was not. The next example I can give you is a bit of a more modern example, and it is one that, again, should not be all of that big of a surprise to you. The end of the Bulls dynasty, of course, in 1998. What team pushed them as hard as any team did in any playoff series in the 6 championship years of the Chicago Bulls, the last dance season? Well, by God, it was the Indiana Pacers in the Eastern Conference Finals, leading in the fourth quarter at the United Center. Wasn't meant to be. But we all knew that that season was indeed going to be the last dance because Jerry Krause did not want a repeat of the late 80s Celtics. As compared to a friend of mine in Lance Scheib, one of his favorite sayings on a football broadcast is to not get bored with success. The late Jerry Krause got bored with success. I don't like winning all these games. I don't like winning all these championships. We have to rebuild. Well, haven't won a title since, and the strike-shortened or lockout-shortened Bulls season in 98-99, they went 13-37 for a 26% winning percentage. So, again, let's keep track of this. Wilt Chamberlain leaving is why the Warriors cratered. Oscar Robertson retiring is part of the reason why the Bucks went spiraling down for several years. The Bulls have yet to recover from the way the Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen days were handled. Notice a trend here? But wait! There's more. The 2003-2004 Los Angeles Lakers. I can tie this back to the Pacers too, because the Pacers had the best record in 2003-2004. The Pacers didn't get past the Pistons in the Eastern Conference Finals, but because the Lakers had won championships in 2000, 2002, or 2001, 2002. Didn't make it back in 2003, but that team is the team that went out and got Karl Malone and Gary Payton to go with Kobe and Shaq and Horace Grant and Rick Fox, etc. The Pistons aren't beating those Lakers, right? Well, the Pistons beat them in 5. The Pistons basically gave away a game where they would have swept them. They would have crushed them. The next year, the Lakers won 34 games. Why? Because Shaq and Kobe feuded, and Shaq ended up playing for the Miami Heat. And because of that, add Shaquille O'Neal to that list. Finally, again, this is more modern. You probably can see where this is going. In 2018, the Cleveland Cavaliers were swept by the Golden State Warriors. And that was the last year that LeBron James played for the Cleveland Cavaliers. The next year after LeBron left Cleveland for a second time, the Cleveland Cavaliers went 19-63 and did not qualify. So for the playoffs. So that is the historical perspective that this Pacers season is trending towards. They're 1-13. Do I think that winning percentage will get better? I do. Just because, again, you'll have enough guys back, not named Tyrese Halliburton, not named Miles Turner, but you'll get Obi Toppin back. Benedict Mathurin was the first game back last night. You've got too many talented pieces here for this to simply, I could extrapolate this and say the Pacers are on track to finish 6-76 this season. I don't think that's going to happen. But could I see a scenario where the Pacers are like kind of a 20-ish win team? Yeah, I could do that. So to put this in perspective, the handful of occasions something like this has happened, it's because the Warriors had to trade Wilt Chamberlain. It's because Oscar Robertson retired, which led to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar wanting to leave Milwaukee. Because the Bulls got bored with success and didn't want to bring back Michael Jordan and crew and Phil Jackson for one more year. It's because Shaq asked Kobe how his backside tastes. If you don't know what that means, look it up. There was actually a diss track on a rap. And then it was LeBron James saying, well, this comeback's been nice, but Cleveland, I gave you a championship. I've done my job. I'm now going someplace else. It's not exactly bad company for Tyrese Halliburton to be able to keep. That is the historical perspective as to how jaw-droppingly bad this has been from the Indiana Pacers so far. All right, class, lecture is over. I hope you're still awake. We'll have a pop quiz on this when we come back. Actually, we won't. I'm going to talk a little Colts when we come back. 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Thursday and Friday, I just kind of almost brushed off the Pacers a little bit different because we spent most of the first 45 minutes of the show talking about them. We'll talk more about the Pacers when Scott Agnes joins at 2 o'clock. Stephen Holder of ESPN joins us in the next segment of the show. Colts back in the building to some degree yesterday, maybe not, but kind of back to ramping things up in terms of getting back to now what is being called the gauntlet portion of the schedule. So Stephen Holder next segment. Zach Osterman talking IU football during the 1:30 segment of the show. Maybe working on another guest coming up in terms of 1:45. But I do want to talk about the Colts because, A, it's kind of what I do every Sunday and for a large chunk of my week, and when I am the guest on shows such as this, Greg Rakestraw filling in for Jake Query and Company here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. But the last easiest team the Colts have played on their schedule is now in the past tense. This week, I think Colts' future opponents, when it combined 5-2, now 2 of those teams, I'm counting kind of wins twice. But let's do the math. Jacksonville won. There's 2 wins. Houston won. Not necessarily the most impressive of fashions, but they did so without their starting quarterback. So call that a win. That would be 4-0. The Seahawks lost. That would be 4-1. The Chiefs lost. That would be 4-2. The Niners won. That would be 5-2. There we go. Fact-checking our math live on the radio. But there's no easy game left. Now, I would argue, I'm not so sure how great the Houston Texans really are, but let's grade them at least on a bit of a curve. They have to play Thursday night football against the Bills, which will not be easy. C.J. Stroud apparently is back at practice. Now, having to clear concussion protocol in a short week, if it happens on Sunday, it's virtually impossible. In kind of reading the tea leaves from Houston, they are not sure if he'll play this week against the Bills, but they feel that is a confident sign that he'll play next week against the Indianapolis Colts. But of the teams the Colts have left, that's the team that probably is the, air quotes here, easiest for the Colts to play. And it's also a team the Colts have a 3-game lead on in terms of the division. And there's kind of a couple of different ways you can look at this or approach this. First things first is you take care of your division. That game against Houston is big here on the 30th. The game in Jacksonville, and Eddie, feel free to check this. I want to say 2014, the last time the Indianapolis Colts won a game in Jacksonville. Good news for the Colts. After this year, you have to go to Jacksonville the next couple of years. Actually, been playing in Orlando. That's where they're going to be playing their games as they completely redo the old Gator Bowl and what I think is now known as Everbank Field. But I think it's been at least a decade since the Colts, and Eddie is nodding his head accordingly. That is the last time that the Colts won a game down there. Because of having a 2-game lead over the Jaguars currently, and let me do a little quick check of the schedule as far as the Jaguars are concerned. Jags schedule. See how quickly I can type it. They got the Cardinals coming up on Sunday. So there is a possibility that is a 1-game lead the Colts have over the Jaguars going there on December 7th. It is certainly possible because the Jaguars play the Cardinals and the Titans back-to-back. Colts have the Texans at home. In theory, you take care of business there. Probably a 1 and no better than a 2-game lead going to that game. So for all of the games coming up for the Indianapolis Colts, you could make a point that the most important game of their season is the game in Jacksonville on December the 7th. If you win that game and have a 2 or a 3-game lead plus the tiebreaker with 4 games left to go, then the way you approach December is completely different. If you go back to last year, the Houston Texans kept losing games in December, but by God, nobody behind them could actually catch them. Well, now it's the Colts that are in that position and hoping not to have a replay of how things played out a season ago. And there's a lot of folks, and I understand it, a lot of folks that are saying, hey, Colts have been good so far, but look at their schedule. 8-2 just might be 10-7. This is now the prove-it time of the year for the Indianapolis Colts. It starts this week against the Kansas City Chiefs, but to me, it's the next two games against divisional foes. Here against the Houston Texans on November 30th. First home game in 5 weeks for the Indianapolis Colts. And then it's the game in Jacksonville, December the 7th. To me, that is truly what is going to determine what the regular season will look like and what the path to the postseason will look like. Eddie, have I carried this long enough to get to a break?
You have indeed.
Because the important thing is Cluster Truck just showed up. It's time for 8 9 to eat. We got like 5 minutes to eat. And we'll tell you about what we're eating when we come back. Stephen Holder will join us as well, as we'll keep the Colts conversation alive. Greg Rakestraw filling in for Jake Query here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. to guess or figure out people's ages by their age when this song hit in the summer of 1990. First of all, Stephen Holder, is Humpty Hump, is that by request by you as far as like your intro or walk-up music on this here program?
It was not by request, but I respect it. I respect it. Look, I mean, I didn't catch it. Was it Digital Underground? Is that what that was?
Of course it was. Absolutely.
Okay.
And I
like I discussed, it's so funny. I'm pretty sure Jake and I had a conversation about this like in the past month on the air. I don't know how it came up, but I mentioned that they had a huge impact on hip hop because that gave us the birth of Tupac Shakur.
Of course.
So there you go.
Of course. So
the more you know.
When Humpty Dance first broke in 1990, you were how old?
Let's see. I would have been probably in 9th grade. So however old that is, 14 maybe.
So in today's lessons we learned, Stephen Holt and I are the exact same age. So now we know the answer to that question because that's exactly the way that it played out in my world too. How was your bye week, my friend?
It was nice and quiet, which is the way I like it. I watched football. How about that? I never get to do that.
Right. I'm thankful I avoided it last night, although I was having trouble getting to sleep, and I put the Cowboys and Raiders on. 5 minutes, that game knocked me out cold.
That was an awful football game. I tried to watch it, and I literally sat there on my phone looking at everything under the sun and not watching the game. It was on, but I wasn't watching it. So, no, awful football game. And, you know, I think we'll have to see whether we actually get some flex Monday nighters. I think that's on the table, I think.
Right.
But I don't know if they're actually going to do it. They're not going to flex the Cowboys, let's be honest. But, you know, we just have to suck it up and watch it because they're never flexing the Cowboys. It is what it is. But that game, America did not deserve that game.
No, and as bad as the Cowboys have been, et cetera, the Raiders are even worse, which is why that one went the way of the Cowboys. So you're telling me you did not feel the need to go to Panama for stem cell treatment during your bye?
No, because I'm not doing anything that would require me to need stem cell treatment. So unlike DeForest Buckner, who has a very dangerous job, but is very good at it. Yes.
We can kind of chuckle and laugh at it, but obviously this is a pretty serious matter. What have you kind of gleaned on his injury recovery timetable? Again, you know, the hope is that we see him in December, but I think that is a hope. Anything you can shed on that story?
Yeah, I don't think timetable is something that we can establish just yet. What I'd say is there has been consistency on the question about whether he is expected back. That question continues to be yes. Now, I think there's a caveat there, which is hopefully, and we think, but certainly there's some positivity about the likelihood of him returning. You know, I think it's huge for the Colts. Look, if they can get to the finish line and wrap up the division without him, you know, more power to them. But I think you're going to want a guy like that in the playoffs. There's no question about it. So if he can get back to the playoffs, that would be plenty. And I am not rubber stamping all those games in between. They got a lot of work to do, and this thing ain't even close to finished. But I'm just sort of looking at it, you know, with maybe some realism here. And I think what you hope is that they can finish the job and have him for the postseason. And the reason I think that's so important, other than the obvious, because the games are important, is because you're going to face some top-notch quarterbacks. And you want that guy going after those quarterbacks that you were going to see in the postseason. So I think that's really that, you know, if they get an outcome that's maybe not optimum would be 4 games. But anything less than that, I think what you're hoping for is you get them for the start of the playoffs.
This turns into like a defensive philosophy, X's and O's conversation. I'll acknowledge that. But now, again, when everybody's healthy, and there's still not exactly clarity on Mooney Ward yet either, but literally lining up on the line of scrimmage with Sauce Gardner, Mooney Ward, and Kenny Moore II, how does that allow you to mask not having a DeForest Buckner?
Well, the whole point about, you know, rushing or covering is we cannot look at them singularly. they are always linked. So the idea here is get that quarterback to hold on to that ball a split second longer, and good things can happen. I actually have maintained all along, I think that their defensive line is not far away from really being very impactful. I actually think the numbers suggest that they have been pretty impactful, even though I think on a down-to-down basis there are times when maybe it doesn't feel that way. I think that's just the NFL today. Quarterbacks make big plays. They're getting interference calls. They're throwing the ball down the field. Look, that's just the NFL. This is happening to every team, okay? So understand that part. And then to your point, I think the bottom line is you can compensate for it a little bit, for that loss of Buckner a little bit. He's great. You can't mask it completely, but you can compensate a little bit with some really good coverage on the back end. And from where they started the season at cornerback to where they are now, or where they hope to be, I guess, if Mooney Ward comes back this week, which seems hopeful. I mean, you're talking about night and day. So this is an incredible opportunity for them to go out there and really be dominant on the back end for maybe the first time.
Frankly, when you're 8-2, you don't have anywhere near the amount of questions that other teams have. And if there have been question marks about the Colts, it's been more on the defensive side than the offensive side. Until the last couple of weeks, and all of a sudden, Daniel Jones has been seeing more pressure. Having time to go back and watch these last 2 weeks, I know that the conversation in terms of player and coaches pick up as of tomorrow, but just with a little more, room in the rearview mirror, thoughts on why suddenly there's been a lot more traffic in and around Daniel Jones in the backfield in the Pittsburgh game and in the Falcons game?
It really defies logic, honestly, because I think going into that Pittsburgh game, I can attest to this, or I guess admit to this. I was on record saying, I don't know if I've seen this offensive line play better. And I mean over the years, over the last, decade or so. I think even going back to like the beginning of the Quentin Nelson era, for example, like I was actually convinced this might have been the best performance in that era, this offensive line. And we've gone from that to what we've seen the last 2 weeks. It's not okay. It's not acceptable. And I think the tackles in particular, that's where I didn't expect the problem to be. And that's where the problem has been. The two tackles. The interior, I think, has been acceptable. I don't have a big problem with that, but they're getting edge pressure. Look, they face some really good edge players, don't get me wrong. Pittsburgh, certainly, and Atlanta, gave them all they could handle as well. But that doesn't explain all of it. I mean, it's not as if other teams don't have high-end pass rushers. They have faced high-end pass rushers. I mean, they played Denver, for crying out loud, earlier this year, right? So I don't have a good explanation for it. I want to say after the Pittsburgh game, I said, okay, bad game. Maybe they can just put it in the rearview mirror. Maybe it's just a one-off. The Atlanta game raises the prospect that it was not, and that should be alarming. And I think what also has to be addressed is that in the midst of all of that, Daniel Jones has to do a better job of holding on to the ball. Look, he's getting just absolutely bombarded. I get that. And I'm not blaming the victim here, but he's got to be aware of what's happening. And when they're getting after him like that, he's got to be smart, and he's got to get rid of the ball or hang on to the ball. And the last thing I would say is that there have been a few instances, I think, in the last two games where he has held the ball in the pocket a split second too long, and that has added to the problems that we are seeing as well. So it is a collective issue, but I would go back to the tackles being the starting point of all of this.
Let's get to award season, shall we? The realistic, I guess the percentage, verbalize, however you want to say. Just how real is JT being an MVP? How legitimate is that 7 weeks left to go?
I think it's real. I think he's going to have to do more, though, and which sounds crazy coming off the game that he just had. But I just think the margin for error for a running back to win that award is so slim. Like, he has to be dominant you can't play the way he played in the Berlin game every week, granted, right? I mean, that's ridiculous. But I do think you have to be pretty dominant consistently. You know, you look at the Pittsburgh game the week before, and if you have a couple of those back to back, now the conversation fades, and people were already probably not inclined to vote for you as a running back, and he could lose steam really quickly, right? So I think it's really just going to boil down to consistency. And I think this Kansas City game is a great opportunity. Like, a lot of the country is going to be able to watch that game. I think there's some anticipation clearly about, how the Chiefs are going to perform. There's going to be eyeballs on that game. You've got to go out there and perform, I think, at a really high level in the games people are watching. They've got a Monday night game next month. They've got a game at Seattle. I imagine that's a game where there could be lots of maybe millions of viewers for that game. So what I would say is that's what he's got to do. He's got to come through in the games people are watching, and he's got to really just be consistent overall. I do think it's still on the table, though. What he's putting together is remarkable. And then this season, the likely suspects are frankly not there. Mahomes, if they lose on Sunday, are we really talking about a 5-6 quarterback of the 5-6 Chiefs being in the conversation? What are we talking about, right? So it's a perfect storm for him to do it if he can, not lose steam.
On the flip side, I wouldn't say flip side, but I guess to a smaller scale, who is Tyler Warren competing against for Rookie of the Year?
That's a great question. Himself,
right?
I don't know. I mean, he is really doing a great job. I actually think that he is in the running for All Pro at that position right now. That's how good he's been this season. That's a great question. Let's think about this. I don't even know who would really be the leading candidates outside of him. I guess it would be Igbuka from Tampa Bay, I believe, is a rookie.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
Right. So, he'd be one. The Browns running back, Judkins. He's had a really interesting year. Look, they're the Browns, and no one knows the kind of season he's having, but he is having a really good season. I think that's kind of it. And McMillan in Carolina's having a good year. I think quietly having a good year. And Bryce Young, by the way, really coming on. So if Bryce Young finishes really strong, you got to think McMillan would be a big part of that. So I think those are kind of and I believe it's Offensive Rookie of the Year and Defensive Rookie of the Year. So those would be his competitors. But let's be honest, Tyler Warren's probably going to end up, or very possibly could end up, leading this team in receptions and receiving yards. And he's in effect their number one receiver many days. So that's a pretty impressive thing to say about the offense that has been pretty much the number one offense all season long.
Again, Stephen Holder, ESPN, joining us on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. It's Greg Rakestraw in for Jake Query here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. What sense, if any, can you make of the fact that the last two times the Indianapolis Colts, Kansas City Chiefs have played, the Indianapolis Colts have been the winning team?
Well, I think the only real takeaway, because there's really no connective tissue between those games, but I would say the takeaway is that, that's why they play the games, right? And I know that's cliche and all that, but it says something about how, I think look at the Colts, right? They're 8-2. And forget about this game. Let's talk about just in general. They're going to have a couple games against Houston, Jacksonville, et cetera, down the stretch, and they're going to be heavily favored, you would think, right?
Right.
But we know better. We know better. But I guess what I'm saying is, look, you got to go out there and you got to finish, and you got to actually show up and do it. That's all I can say. And then, frankly, the other thing is about rising to the occasion too. There's something to be said for getting up for a big game, and it's a weird sort of deal, right? Michael Pittman was talking about this last week. The fact that for the Colts, this feels like a game that they're getting up for. Like, it's a big game. It's a big challenge. They got to go play this 500 team on the road. But that 500 team happened to have been in the last 3 Super Bowls. So they actually don't feel like the team that's got the upper hand here. They're kind of taking this underdog approach. I don't know if anybody's buying it, but that's kind of how they're operating. And I think it's working for them. So they don't really feel themselves as being sort of this favorite and this overbearing favorite from week to week. They still think they got a lot to prove. I think that's a good thing.
Finally, before we let you go, and again, I made reference to this in the last segment of the show. If someone is not on board with the Colts, it is easy to look at their schedule and say, all right, they're 8-2 now. Here's the 7 teams that are left. Maybe this is a 10-win football team. And every time we do predictions like these, is it in a vacuum? You never know who might miss for getting injured, whether it's your team, their team, whatever the case may be. 8-2 now. If you and I are having this conversation on January the 5th, as you see this team as it's built now, how many wins do you think they have after January the 4th?
So you're talking about in the playoffs.
I'm talking about what is their regular season record going to be going to the playoffs?
I got you. That's a great question. I think they've got 7 left. I think they've got to win 4 of these last 7, which gets you to 12. I think 12 is a really nice number and an achievable number. I'm going to give them some grace down the stretch. I think they'll lose a couple of these. There's too many pitfalls for it to not happen, you know? And you're going to have some teams that are scratching and clawing, desperation situations, down the stretch. They're going to slip up, We've already talked about them missing DeForest Buckner. So I'm going to give them some grace. But getting to 12 gets you a whole lot right now. So I think, will they be the number 1 seed? I don't know. We'll see. They got the work cut out for them. But I see them winning the division and being, one of those top seeds in the AFC. If they can just finish the job, then that's going to be the key.
Thanks for the time and the insight, my friend. I'll see you tomorrow at the Complex.
All right, you got it.
Again, that is Stephen Holder of ESPN, and he is joining us courtesy of the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. We'll get back to the Colts coming up likely during the 2 o'clock hour of the show. Very guest-heavy between now and about 2:15, then you and me to wrap up the show. By the way, going into last weekend with Jonathan Taylor not playing, here were the NFL MVP odds. Matthew Stafford, followed by Drake May, followed by Jonathan Taylor, followed by Patrick Mahomes, who again, to Steven's point, is on the quarterback of a 5-5 football team. Not that I think that's going to make the Colts' job any easier in terms of being in Kansas City on Sunday afternoon. And then Josh Allen is 5th. So I would say going into the week, maybe Drake May caught up with Matthew Stafford a little bit just because he had the stage on Thursday to himself. Stafford led his team to a victory, but against a really good defense in terms of the Seattle Seahawks, one that, again, will be on the Indianapolis Colts radar sooner rather than later. So maybe JT is holding in 3rd. Maybe that is Stafford and May neck and neck. JT right behind them. Maybe Allen has jumped into 4th, and Patrick Mahomes has jumped into 5th. Again, not to just, repeat or reiterate what we talked about in the last segment of the show, but maybe to further emphasize, I think this Colts football team is a good football team. But let's acknowledge how tough the next 3 places are they are going to play, not named Lucas Oil Stadium. In Kansas City. Now, are the Chiefs as good as they have been? Clearly not. Are the Chiefs a desperate football team? Clearly they are. Sunday will not be easy for the Indianapolis Colts. Next road game is in Jacksonville. Again, think we stated just how the history has been for the Colts. And again, because it's the team directly behind you, that is what makes that game so difficult for the Colts. Again, of all of the games the Colts have left on their schedule, to me, That is the single most important game they have the remainder of the year is in Jacksonville. It completely changes the conversation on the back end, depending on what you do, win or lose, on that game on December the 7th. And then after that, you get to go play in Seattle, where they specifically built the stadium to send as much noise back on top of you as possible. And knowing you got to make that cross-country trip to get out there. Now, maybe after going to Berlin, going to Seattle doesn't seem so bad. And Seattle seemingly has some issues in terms of what they can do offensively. Sam Darnold kept throwing the ball to the Los Angeles Rams in their game on one of the many huge games. If there was a week for the Colts to be off and you just wanted to watch some good football or some important matchups, one of those didn't happen last night, but a lot of those happened in terms of the games that were played on Sunday. And Rams and Seahawks almost got buried because it was opposite the Broncos and Chiefs, especially for here because we frankly care more about the AFC. But the next 3 road games for the Colts are not easy. You know what is easy? Ordering food from Cluster Truck. Thanks to the good folks from Cluster Truck for bringing stuff by. Eddie, what have you been dining on for lunch? And because you've got, again, this war game set up where I can't see you because of monitors, is there any of it left? Have you devoured it all at this point?
Yes, all has been devoured. I did that while you were talking to Steven.
You're welcome, by the way.
Yes. Normally I go with the Korean barbecue salmon, which is very good.
Oh,
very
okay.
good.
All right.
Today I went with the barbecue pulled pork mac and cheese.
Okay.
Also very good.
Again, not complaining about that. I went for my favorite salad that I get. There's 2 salads I really love. And since one of them is not a sponsor, I'll just mention this one. And so I read off the order to make sure I get it properly. The Applewood chicken salad with the cranberry poppy seed dressing. The greens are fresh. The chicken is great. Dressing that is homemade. It's tremendous. So I did a good job of eating healthy. Only problem is the good folks from Cluster Truck, without Eddie or I ordering, also sent dessert. And the dessert is oatmeal apple caramel cookies. And it sounds just as good as you think it is. I gave Eddie a cookie. I have 2 on my side of the table. And I doubt that Eddie will see even half of the other cookie because it probably will be consumed during the course of the next break. Again, Cluster Truck, always made fresh to order in scratch kitchens all across central Indiana. We welcome them back as a sponsor of what we do here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Thank you, Cluster Truck, for the tremendous lunch. And I have talked long enough where I get to go back to eating again. So with that, to break we go. Zach Osterman joins us next. The Indiana University football team has a bye. The Indiana University football team still merits us talking about them on a bye week. That and then some. We'll do that when we come back on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Because they've only had one bye that, in fact, has sole possession of first place in the Big Ten at 11-0 would be the Indiana Hoosiers. And the man that chronicles all things Hoosierdom for the Indianapolis Star is Zach Osterman, who joins us now on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. Good afternoon, my friend. How are you?
I'm good. How about you?
I'm good. Of all of the various stats, factoids that can leave you slack-jawed about Indiana football, maybe is the one that we can almost like win judge a 24-point win against Wisconsin. Does that like rank high up on the list because we were seemingly bored by only beating Wisconsin by 24 points?
It is a very how the other half lives moment. You know, like I had somebody on just kind of like in the Indiana football sort of orbit post-game Saturday say it felt like an Ohio State win, where there are, you know, if you watch like an 11-12 win Ohio State season, there are 3 or 4 games like this where you find yourself walking away saying, I'm not sure if they played well. I'm not sure if they looked tired or disengaged, or is it that they just knew they could soft pedal, or they got the other team's best effort, or whatever. But you kind of gave away thinking, well, that was less than I expected, and yet still well more than showed a ton of weakness. I think there are some things that, you know, Indiana over the last several weeks might want to try and improve here on the bye week, and then, again, whatever gap they get between the Big Ten championship game, presuming they're in it, and their start of the playoff. But, yeah, I mean, it felt, you know, very much like the workmanlike, forgettable wins that build a season like this, frankly.
Or, frankly, again, one blown defensive assignment. It's the only reason that Wisconsin scored. And Indiana could punt the ball away on the plus side of the 50 because they knew their defense was going to give up more points. Again, very efficient in beating Wisconsin for a third consecutive time. All right, so much, you know, because of you and I know each other as well as we do, I can try to go kind of rando on the questions, and they lead to some great results. So here's one thing that struck me in watching the game on Saturday is that there have been all of these renovations at Memorial Stadium, and now we're hitting max capacity pretty easily. Has there been any talk about trying to find a way to expand Memorial Stadium? Merchants Bank Field, mind you, at Memorial Stadium. Could there be more seats in that stadium's future, Zach?
I'm not sure. You know, Scott Dolson has made it clear that his next long-term capital project is a substantial renovation of Memorial Stadium. Those things, you know, do take longer now. Realistically, you are, you know, if you're funneling 10, 15, 20 million donor dollars a year into a collective, you know, I know that doesn't seem like much, but if you're paying for a $200 million stadium renovation over 20 years, that's $10 million a year. That $10 million might be going to NIL now, so it's just going to take a little bit longer to get some of that together. I think that's one reason why, you know, it certainly seemed, just kind of reading the room, like Indiana was happy to sort of fall in line on the private capital discussions that I think this week have kind of hit some snags at the Big Ten level. I don't know exactly what all is going to go into the scope of that. I think that the big thing, that the one big ticket item I'm pretty confident as and when Indiana moves forward on that is going to be press box renovation / premium seating. And obviously, you know, those are a little bit one and the same. I think you're going to see some premium seating areas that they try to open up in other areas of the stadium. We've seen, obviously, the suites that they've put together in the south end zone that are similar to the ones that they have at, like, the Big Ten championship game and at some playoff games and things, just like the on-field stuff. But I think they'd probably like to carve out some small areas, like within the seating bowl, for a little bit more premium-type seating. I'm not sure exactly how they do that. I am confident that they want to replace that press box. I don't say this lightly. It may very well be the worst in the Big Ten. Certainly now that Penn State has demolished the bandbox that it had at Beaver Stadium and rebuilt something modern on the other side, Indiana is well behind the times there. And that's not just press complaining. You know, most of that is donor seating. 4 is donor seating, 5 is press, 6 is donor seating, and then 7 is a broadcast area. So if you demolish that and expand it, that's probably going to be more revenue. That's going to be more, again, luxury seating or premium seating. I think Indiana would really like to tackle that. I have heard rumors about expanding seating. I think in particular, possibly adding a second deck on the east side, which is the Assembly Hall side. I don't know how true that is. I don't even know how feasible that is, given the ground over there, and you'd have to do all kinds of like engineering impact studies. But that is, I think, been much more in sort of the, hey, wouldn't it be cool if Indiana did this realm of chatter, rather than something that I am confident in saying would be part of any renovation.
Again, Zach Osterman, Indianapolis Star on the Java House Peel and Port guest line. Greg Rakestraw in for Jake Query, 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. So the next one needs a little build-up here. Obviously, we're 3 weeks away from Indiana and Kentucky playing in a regular season basketball game for the first time since the watch shot, for the first time in 14 years. Yet, remarkably, that game might get trumped by Fernando Mendoza winning the Heisman. Which of those events are you covering, Zach? Are you going to New York City for a Heisman? Are you doing IU in UK?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I don't know if we have a firm answer yet, to be honest with you. I think, there's been a hotel booked in Lexington for a while just because we can plan those things out, and that's a drive, so it's a little bit easier to move around. But I'm honestly not sure of the answer, because I think until recently, Fernando Mendoza felt like a contender, but maybe not the contender, or one of the, sort of smallest group of leading contenders. I think that has certainly changed in the last 2 or 3 weeks. You and I can sit here and debate the merits and the flaws of the Heisman, but the reality is that he is starting to meet, some of the, not just the numbers, but the moments, I think, that tend to kind of compose a Heisman resume insofar as what it's going to look like this year. I think there's going to be some conversation about everybody's stats being deflated. I think there's going to be some conversation about the way that coaches are handling players in a playoff era when they know that there's not just one or maybe 2 games on the other side of the regular season. But if you're Indiana or Ohio State, you're hoping to plan for a Big Ten championship game. You're hoping to plan for 3 playoff games. That's a 15-game season. There's going to be some of these teams that are going to be looking at a potential 16-game season. I think there's been more sort of shortening games, benching guys late, leaving some numbers on the field in favor of kind of grabbing, almost just like saying, like, if we can grab a couple games out of your legs, a couple games worth of hits out of your body and your arm and whatever else, we're going to do that. And I think it's that's a wider philosophical discussion, but I think that where Fernando Mendoza is right now, and as much as this specific award is driven by a narrative that just sort of develops organically across the course of the season, that narrative this year feeling more and more like the winner of the Big Ten championship game gets the Heisman Trophy too. It does feel like that is a very, like, Indiana fans might need 2 TVs in the living room on Saturday night.
Which is, again, just bonkers to say that out loud and not get laughed out of the building in terms of saying it. Final thing before we let you go, and again, this is hitting the fast forward button. Fernando Mendoza is going to lead this charge. But as you're sitting down to watch the NFL draft at the end of April, how many Indiana Hoosiers do you think get their name called? Not necessarily first round. I mean rounds 1 through 7. How many draftable players has Curt Cignetti put together on this roster in Bloomington?
Yeah, I'm trying to just kind of catalog quickly and allow for maybe 1 or 2 guys that are fringe picks.
Sure.
Because I think there's going to be a couple where the decision to do 1 more year versus go ahead and, get into the NFL is going to be real 50-50. I would say probably drafted specifically, because I think there's a few more that'll grab onto UFA contracts, training camp invites. Drafted, I would say, just off the top of my head, 1, 2, maybe at least 4, possibly more than that. And again, that is being conservative. That is allowing for a couple of guys that maybe are, not going to measure out well and are going to need to take to sort of take the chance when they get to, like a training camp. That's allowing for 1 or 2 guys that maybe come back that could go, but say the NIL number, the opportunity to boost my stock 1 more time really couldn't hurt. I would say at least 4. And I wouldn't be shocked if the number is ultimately higher than that, because I think there are guys on this team, I'm reaching for some of the obvious ones like Mendoza or Aiden Fisher or D'Angelo Pons, but it's also not hard to convince me somebody like Roman Hemby or E.J. Williams, gets into a combine setting or a pro day setting, puts some really impressive numbers up, and convinces somebody they're worth a late round flyer too.
Do you think this is final thing? Because I'm going to do the broadcast thing and lie about saying it's final question. Think of one more. Is it some sort of cosmic or karmic balance that the Indiana Hoosiers can't lose in football and Liverpool has lost 5 times in the Premier League? Zach, what's going on here?
No, I don't think that's the. I think what Indiana's doing is much more Leicester City than Liverpool. Which, if you look at Leicester City's results, it's going a lot worse there. So if somehow the blood flow has been completely redirected, then I would look more toward the King Power Stadium than I would Anfield at this moment in time.
I will try to see if I can get a famed tenor to sing at the next Indiana home sporting event to celebrate for the Indiana Hoosiers the way Leicester did some decade ago. Thanks for the time on an off day, my friend. We'll catch up soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me as always.
Zach Osterman, again, joining us on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. I almost feel bad that we didn't bring up Indiana basketball because they've been pretty good. The Incarnate Word game was kind of on Sunday. Lindenwood, coming up on Thursday. Good news is for Zach, he can dedicate all of his time to Liverpool and Nottingham Forest at 10 a.m. on Saturday because the Hoosiers play Thursday, don't play again until Tuesday in terms of basketball. Obviously, football does not play again until we get to next Friday. Somebody is playing football locally on Saturday. We'll tell you about that when we come back, in a pretty meaningful game as well. 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Welcome back. It is Query and Company, just the company part today. Derek Schultz filled in yesterday. You had me, Greg Rakestraw, on both Thursday and Friday and today. Jake on his way back across the pond today and is back in this chair tomorrow. Now, originally, we had two guests scheduled for today, Stephen Holder and Scott Agnes. As of this morning, we added a third in terms of Zach Osterman, and he was great, and frankly, I could have spoken more to him, and I'm sure I'll talk more IU football in the next segment of the show. But the Hoosiers are off this weekend. In terms of area college football, there is a team that is most certainly on, and that would be my alma mater, the University of Indianapolis. I got an email from my buddy Ryan Thorpe saying, hey, I'm looking to do a kind of a media tour with Chris Keevers to promote the fact that we're playing a home football game in terms of the playoffs for the first time in 7 years. Can you hook me up with, like, JMV's producer? So I can do that, or I'm doing a show, like, right now, and you can be on the program, like now. And so let's get to Chris Keevers right now, head coach at the University of Indianapolis. Hello, my friend. How are you?
Good. How are you doing? Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Obviously, you knew this team was special from day number one. Just your thoughts about kind of where you sit now, 10-1 on the season, getting a home game for the first time, as you mentioned, in 7 years, and being the number 3 seed in your region.
Well, we're pretty excited about it. I mean, we've got a really good football team. We've got a great quarterback. He's one of the top players in Division II, and people need to come see him. I mean, we got our first home game since 2018, and it's a big one. And we're playing Truman State at 2:00 at Key Stadium. But you need to come see this quarterback. We've got some really good defensive players, some local kids that are really good. So, Danny Royster, a defensive end from Lawrence North, Alvin Contreras, a safety from outside linebacker from Ben Davis. So we've got some good players here, and from local guys that people would like to watch.
You had 3 non-conference games to work with. You had the monumental matchup, which you went and won at Marion, which I was able to be a part of from a television broadcast standpoint. Marion finished the regular season 6th in the NAIA. The 2 other non-conference games are teams that made the playoffs too, in terms of Findlay and Ashland. When you look back on how you scheduled your non-conference, just your thoughts as to how that got you ready for this time of the year.
Yeah, we played some really good football teams early. I mean, it was a gauntlet. And we responded. We lost the game early to Findlay, who's the 2nd seed, and by 3 points, and really had a chance to win that. And I kind of blew that one, but it got us ready. There's no question. We were very fortunate with the schedule that we wanted to schedule good football teams, and we did, and it got us ready for this point. We're 8th in the country right now, and it's because we scheduled so well early in the season.
Well,
played well.
You knew you had kind of a good team waiting on you the last game of the year, and Upper Iowa gave you a battle. What got you over the hump on Saturday afternoon at home?
Our quarterback and our offense went down there and scored, late, and then they started coming back and driving, and then Contreras made a pick, on the 10-yard line. They were getting ready to go in, and with 20 seconds left to win the game. It was an exciting game, and we had a great crowd, and I'm hoping to see that same crowd, next weekend.
All right, so what is unique about this? And first of all, it's great for your league. It hasn't happened that often where you have gotten 2 playoff teams. You and Lindenwood did it a couple of years ago before they made the jump up to the OVC. But now it is you and Truman State, and that's whom you're playing. So to have played them already, what does that mean for the upcoming playoff game on Saturday afternoon?
It means we're going to get their best shot. I mean, we went to their place and beat them by 10. It was a great football game. They're a disciplined team. They're a really good football team, well coached, really good on special teams. Every game against them is always tight. We're 2 evenly matched teams. I mean, they're always good football games. So, I'm doing this. I want to get people in the stands. We've got a really good football team. We're 8th in the country. First home game since 2018. We're just trying to get people to come watch us play.
All right. So you talk about Gavin Sukup, 3rd year in the program for you. He is up for the Division II version of the Heisman. I understand your concern is about Truman coming up on Saturday afternoon. When does that award get handed out, Chris?
It's by middle of December, so we got some time. So we're not worried about that. He's been the league MVP the last 2 years. He's gotten lots of awards. He's he would tell you too. We want to win in the playoffs. That's very important. We got to win this game. When we got a home game, we're in a good position. We've got to win this football game. Then it's we'll think about that later.
How many kids currently on your roster, Chris?
112.
Okay. There are 112 young men that you love and treat like a son. One of those young men is actually your son, that being Tucker, and this is the last go-round you get to coach him. What is it like to share this season and potentially a playoff run with him?
It's been special. 5 years I get to see him. I've coached for 38 years, and for 5 years I get to see my son in that meeting room and spend every day with him, and that's wonderful. Guys, your kids grow. I've raised 4 kids. Everybody grows up and moves on, and you don't see them as much. And for us to get 5 years together during his college years has been really special. And he's had a great career, and he really enjoyed it. And he's going to walk out of here with his master's in business. It's been a win-win for everybody.
When people show up and watch your team play Saturday afternoon at 2, what do you want them to see? What do you want them to take note of your football team?
I want them to see how efficient our offense is. I mean, we do a very good job of moving the football, multiple sets, run, pass. I mean, it's entertaining football, and that quarterback is dynamite. And Garrett Sherrill's a tailback that's been playing really well. He's from Brownsburg. He's been a great player for us. He's a sophomore. Want to see that. They want to see our defense fly around, make plays, and we got to get some turnovers and be physical at the line of scrimmage. They like to run the ball. They've got a back that's 6. He's probably about 5'10", about 230 pounds. He's a fire hydrant. He's really good. So it's going to be a great football game.
Haven't seen Truman over the years. You know exactly what to expect. Just a matter of can you go and stop it. I'm so happy for you, buddy. Good luck on Saturday afternoon.
Greg, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
You got it. Chris Keevers, and again, he's talked about being in coaching for 38 years. Chris played at Purdue, played at John Marshall High School. He's an Eastside Indianapolis guy. He's been at UIndy for 32 years, and I know that off the top of my head because his first year was my freshman year at the University of Indianapolis. He was an assistant to Joe Polizzi. Then he was assistant to Bob Bartolomeo, and now he has carved out his own identity as the head coach at UIndy. And ever since the GLVC began playing football, I want to say in the fall of 2012, UIndy has been the ridiculously dominant program. But one thing that they are wanting to do more of is, frankly, win in the postseason. They've often been like kind of the 5 or the 6 or the 7 seed where they haven't had a chance to play at home. They do this time around, at least in week number 1. 2 o'clock is the kickoff down at Key Stadium. Hopefully, you can make it down. We'll take this quick time out. We'll talk about the Indiana Pacers, who are our dominant topic of the opening 40 minutes of the show. That may be the only time that Dominant and the Indiana Pacers are put together in 2025 and 2026. They're far from good, but we'll talk about them next on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. You are the substitute teacher. The key to doing the show is have really good guests. That has been the case for the entirety of the 1 o'clock hour. That continues into the 2 o'clock hour of the program. I'll try to figure out a way to get us the final 45 minutes or so home for the rest of the show before JMB takes over here at 3 o'clock. My name is Greg Rakestraw, filling in for Jay Query. It's 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. For a final time today, we go to the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. It is Scott Agnes of Fieldhouse Files who joins us now. Hello, my friend. How are you?
Hello, Rake. Doing well. How about you?
I'm good. I know that you feel the content gods have largely been good to you in 2025, given a run to the NBA Finals, given the continued interest in the Indiana Fever, even without, again, Caitlin Clark for a good chunk of the season. Apparently, the fate of good fortune has ended, given how the last 5-6 weeks have gone. What is it like to go from such a switch of reality from Father's Day weekend till now with the Indiana Pacers?
Yeah, it's a remarkable shift. It really is. I mean, you have a game last night, and social media not very active. Those that are obviously and understandably so upset. I mean, the worst start in franchise history, and yet at the same time, some of it is understandable, Rake, obviously, with all the injuries and far too many injuries than any team should have to put up with in an entire season. But to me, what compounds the issue is, to me, it's the details. It's some of the levels of play. It's 2 games ago against the Raptors, giving up 30 points in the paint in 1 quarter. It's the turnovers last night with 21. So as a whole, to the big picture, yeah, it is a dramatic shift going from the central hub of basketball, where Pacers, it's the high of highs, and then you go right into a fever season. And then I've reiterated, it feels like this last 6 months or so, I've furthered my degree in sports injury history, and that's not a good thing. I don't like that.
All right, so have you started to let your attention start to focus to whom the Pacers are taking in the NBA draft in June? Have you gotten to that point yet?
No, I have not, and here's why. One, not to this extreme, certainly, but the Pacers kind of went through this injury bug last year, very reminiscent, with several starters out, Nembhard, Halliburton, Nesmith, all of those guys missing time, to the point where I still remember a November game in Houston where a two-way guard named Quentin Jackson, who's still with them obviously, got in the starting lineup and was their top scorer. So to me, what I'm looking for is the next dozen games. It's kind of the make or break to me, right? You'll be, by then, 26 games in. You'll be approaching Christmas time. There's some very winnable games during that stretch. If things stay off the rails a little bit over the next dozen games, do not improve significantly, then I turn my attention to what's next. But I'd like to see a much bigger sample size to better understand whether this team could, win an NBA Finals, or the other side of it, if you just got to, scratch and put Band-Aids over the rest of this season and have the front office and scouts really lock in for next summer.
I am of the opinion that there is not some sort of blockbuster move coming, because, again, the team you built for this year is, frankly, the team you have under contract for next year, and the team you have the contract for the year after that, too, with the obvious exception of Benedict Mathurin. So with that as the caveat, do you see any sort of moves, and not by moves in terms of bringing in, 10-day contract guys, because obviously we have seen that, hardship contracts,
sure.
et cetera. Do you see a trade at all for this team this year?
Not yet. No, I don't see it being a situation like we saw early last year when they were without a center and desperately needed something and went out and acquired Thomas Bryant and then later picking up Tony Bradley and such. I think, again, I'll go back to that dozen games or so, because, to your point then, if this season isn't at all competitive, then you might think about moving on and seeing if there's any deals that make sense for both teams. I don't think there's any assets on this roster right now, Greg, that you immediately look to trade or whatever. I think, for example, Mathurin's the obvious name. But I think both sides want to see what this season can entail. Right. And last night was just Mathurin's 3rd game. And if he really breaks out and maybe he becomes a pillar for this franchise moving forward. On the other side, maybe it's just not a good fit. The playing styles, all of that, and they do decide to move on, knowing also the other thing they have to keep in mind, not just next year, but future years, is how much money they've committed and where, because they got Pascal Siakam on a max contract. You have Tyrese Halliburton on a max contract. You just gave Neesmith the extension. All their guys, except for really Miles Turner, got new money in the last 2 years. And so you got to forecast that out about 3 years, and where does Mathurin fit in? I think that will be a better question to be answered in January.
Scott Agnes again, Fieldhouse Files, and the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. Greg Rakestraw in for Jake Query on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. But again, you're asking guys to do different things than they were as the parts were assembled last year. Again, kind of a qualifier before I give you the question. Who are the guys you are most concerned with regression that you have seen so far this season?
I would say from a regression standpoint, I would the first guy that comes to mind is a Ben Shepherd.
Yeah.
And you are right. One of the things that has challenged this entire roster is they've all had to do a lot more. The first guy I think of is Pascal Siakam in that respect. And from a leadership standpoint, from the on-court workload, from playing more minutes than maybe he would like to. I mean, they'd like to keep him around 30 minutes. He's been playing 36 and 34. But from the other, and I guess probably, quite frankly, would be Isaiah Jackson, with the caveat being he is just 1 year exactly removed from that Achilles. So I'd probably give him another 3-month buffer to work his way back. That probably me being a little too cautious and optimistic and such, but those Achilles injuries are nasty. But to me, it's probably been Shepherd. Jarris Walker, I don't know if he's regressed. He just hasn't risen to the moment. It's felt too big or a little bit uncomfortable. I think maybe it goes back to a little bit what Pascal Siakam, Greg, was saying the other day, was guys got to play more confident in their own game, in what they're doing, being more assured of themselves, because when they're not, the passes are getting intercepted. They're overthinking everything. And we talk about this all the time, right, in sports, is when you're overthinking out there, you're not playing free, and things just get held up. And it feels like that's a lot is what has transpired right now with this group.
I touched on this, in terms of things that are keeping me interested of this group. Obviously, Matherin's development is 1. Jarris Walker's development is 2. Probably 3rd is Johnny Furphy. And obviously, from an injury standpoint, we kind of have something of a timeline for Obi Toppin, something of a timeline for Aaron Neesmith, even though it's more recent. What exactly are we hearing on Furphy's situation?
Yeah, so Furphy had a re-injury, right, of certain things, and a player that right now he's exactly who you would want to be out there that could really maximize this time and take full advantage of that. But unfortunately, he remains out dealing with that left ankle sprain after just kind of tweaking that. I think we don't have any exact timeline. You're right about that. I would suspect a couple more weeks on that, only because we haven't gotten any update. We haven't seen him work out on the court, and something like that you got to be ultimately cautious with. I think one of the moving forward questions will be, once Aaron Neesmith misses another game, then the team becomes eligible for another hardship exception. Do they utilize that, and in what direction they go? But of the names on this roster that I would love to be seeing, Johnny Furphy, absolutely, Rake, is number 1 of guys that could really help them right now and could really benefit from this hole where they need anybody to step up, but he's just been unavailable.
Again, you're not ready to kind of cut bait on this season yet. You say, hey, give it kind of one more month, and then we can have the conversation. A lot of us, and I raise my hand, I thought this could be a 45 or 46 win team. I really did, going into the course of the season. Now, I'm not sure how many games it would take for this group to win 45 or 46 games. How finally, before I let you go, how are you altering season projections based on what has happened these first 14 games?
Yeah, mostly significantly altering it just because of player health and availability. When they're constantly missing starters out of the mix, you're going to see Aaron Neesmith miss about a month here with a left MCL sprain. That's nasty. Obi Toppin's stress fracture in his foot, we won't hear about him until a month into next year. That redirects and changes everything, absolutely, because I was right there with you. I thought even without Halliburton, I think the over-under was about 36, 37 wins, and to me that was laughable.
Rick
Carlisle's going to have this. Yeah, Rick Carlisle's going to have this team over 40 without a doubt. Well, that's obviously given decent health, and they've been giving horrible health. So I think that number under is looking really good right now. The challenge is they just got to get through the next month and a half, 2 months. You get into next year. The real question then becomes, Rake, is it too late? And what do you do about it moving forward?
Again, my general thought is that as tough as this is to palate, the worst mistake is to overreact and trade away key pieces. And I don't think that's going to happen, Scott. Do you?
I do not. No, I think they really are comfortable with this core, with this group that got them there, not just last year, but the year before that in the Eastern Conference Finals. And I think part of what we're seeing is the after effects of the long seasons, the playing style, the extra possessions, the playing and pressuring full court. Look, they've been doing something differently than most of the league for the last 3 seasons. It's not just last year when most of the basketball fans took notice. Oh, this team from Indiana, why are they pressuring full court? Or why is their possessions up so much? I wonder, in a greater study, is that a big contribution about what's going on? And then, of course, reaching the very last day of the finals last year in Game 7 really cuts into your offseason by about 2 months, which directly impacts rehab and recovery and the reset, because by September 1, this team was down in Orlando with a players-only minicamp, getting the season unofficially started down there. So there's a lot they got to figure out on the fly. But, yes, you do not overreact in the good times. It's like the stock market. When things are going great, you don't overreact, and the same thing when things are going terribly.
All right, what's new on Fieldhouse Files, buddy?
Yeah, I got a big notebook coming out here with a variety of things that I think fans will be very interested in, a lot of different bullet points. And one thing I did want to mention on the way out, just because maybe it's because he was behind the scenes and an unfamiliar name, but we lost Kevin Mackey in the last week.
Yeah.
And obviously, from the college basketball area, I knew from the Pacers he was a scout for more than 2 decades, but touching on him as well. And he was just, man, I love sitting next to him anytime and picking his brain about anything, because he just loved talking hoops and he loved Lance Stevenson.
Some people are natural storytellers. That man was one of them. God rest his soul. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very glad you brought that up. Thanks, Scotty. We'll talk soon.
Okay. Thank you, Ray.
Scott Agnes, again, Fieldhouse Files, our guest. And yes, Kevin Mackey, an integral part of Pacers' success of years gone by as a scout. And Kevin, obviously forever known as being the guy that led one of the great NCAA tournament upsets of all time, of which the Indiana Hoosiers fell victim to. The anniversary of that being 40 years ago comes up this March when number 14 Cleveland State beat the 3rd-seeded Indiana Hoosiers the year before they won their last national championship in 1987. All right, so a bit of transaction news for the Indianapolis Colts. This is all of the practice squad variety, but a couple of these guys maybe are names that you might know. So the Colts have added 4 players to the practice squad. I'm going to butcher somebody's name. I apologize up front. Viliami Fehoko Jr. Sure, defensive end. Chris Wormley, defensive tackle. George Odom, formerly of the Indianapolis Colts and a very good special teams player, has been added. And Eli Pancol, who was from Pendleton Heights High School. He's been added to the practice squad. Eli is a wide receiver. 3 players have been let go from the practice squad. Only player of note, Maximilian Mang. And the reason he is a player of note, he frankly was not going to get on the active roster anytime soon, but he was the Colts international roster slot from Germany. And the Colts wait till after they go to Berlin to let go of Max. So there is that. I think there are 2 tight ends, if not 3 on the practice squad. At least there were, because like in camp they had 7 and he was number 7. And my goodness, Will Mallory was great in training camp. Has barely seen the field all year because of what Tyler Warren has done in the passing game. As Stephen Holder talked about last hour, he may lead the Colts in receptions and receiving yards at the end of the season. And what Miley Cox and Drew Ogletree have done in terms of the run blocking game for this football team. So a little bit of Colts transactional news to share with you as well. In terms of upcoming games for the Pacers tomorrow night, the Hornets are in town for a 7 o'clock tip-off. Pacers then are back on the road in Cleveland. Again, that's the in-season tournament game. Not that I'm sure that matters at this point, at 7 o'clock on Friday. Pacers then don't play again until Monday when the Pistons are here. And then there is the traditional night after Thanksgiving game where the Pacers host the Washington Wizards. Again, that is coming up next Friday. So the kind of usual rhythm and routine for the Indiana Pacers, just not the usual suspects in terms of bodies on the floor, wins on the scoreboard, or in the standings, given the fact they are 1-13. So there you go. We have exhausted our guest list for today's program. If there has been something that you would like to chat about, now is the time. At Greg Rakestraw in terms of Twitter, Greg at 1070thefan.com in terms of the email, or you can dial up the program to 317-239-1070. 317-239-1070. Phone lines work. Eddie is standing by to answer them, and we can have a chat. Again, if you're just joining us, here's what you've missed from a guest perspective. Stephen Holder talked all things Colts bye. Again, dealing with the absence of DeForest Buckner. We will learn a lot more tomorrow. Again, DeForest is going to be out at minimum until the middle of December and maybe a little bit longer. The hope is Mooney Ward could be back as soon as Sunday's game. And when facing a quarterback to the level of Patrick Mahomes, having a roster of defensive backs that look like Sauce Gardner, Mooney Ward, and Kenny Moore II certainly increases your chances for success. So tomorrow's 11:30-ish press conference for Shane Steichen will give us a little bit more of an answer, and frankly, most importantly, his practice status for tomorrow will give us more of an answer on that. We talked about JT's MVP odds. We talked about Tyler Warren's Offensive Rookie of the Year odds. And we can talk about those things with you right now at 317-239-1070. We talked with Zach Osterman. We talked all things IU football. And again, I kind of, knowing Zach is very verbose and great in these scenarios, I kind of gave him 3 or 4 big picture questions and just let him go. One of the things that struck me when I was watching the Indiana-Wisconsin football game, and I was a little busy with my own college football game, the Motown Bell Classic, on Saturday afternoon. So the way that I digested the Indiana-Wisconsin game, I'm a big fan of the Big Ten Network's Big Ten in 60. So that's how I watched the Indiana-Wisconsin game, was last night, the freeze-dried version. And as I saw every seat being full in Memorial Stadium, for generations, we're like, you know what? 53,000 or so is a pretty good number. It's not that hard to pack. In the days when we had media guides, we would joke, hey, get the helicopter up because Ohio State's here. The place actually looks full. This is where we take the picture. Now, and I remember when I had this discussion, remember the days when Indiana would have like 9 different helmet combinations during the course of a year? And they would announce every Friday, hey, here's the helmet combo we're wearing today. I remember being in this chair or probably 2 floors up when our studios were on the 6th floor and not the 4th. And I said, folks, one of these days, the conversation about Indiana University football is going to be about winning. Guess what? We're there now. 2024 and 2025, that's what the conversation has been about. So once you do that consistently, and you've invested so much, obviously in players, as any school that wants to be competitive has to do in this environment, but you've clearly invested in terms of what the head coach is making as well, the next step is, how do you get ROI, return on that investment? Are we to a point where we need to start talking about the expansion of Memorial Stadium? Are we now at that point? And we talked about which IU players could be drafted. And think about this. It will have been 14 years since Indiana and Kentucky have met in a regular season men's basketball game. That will take place on December the 13th. And could you have imagined anything else in the Indiana University landscape that would have potentially taken the spotlight on those 2 teams getting together? They have played twice in the NCAA tournament since that time, 2012 and 2016. But the regular season series is back. And it could be a night of split attention. The reason being, at the same time as Indiana and Kentucky are playing each other, Fernando Mendoza might be the Heisman Trophy winner. As of now, he is the favorite. Not a shoo-in favorite, but a favorite. We talked about that with Zach. Chris Keevers from the University of Indianapolis. Again, you know I'm a sucker for small college football. Also always happy to help the alma mater. They got a big game coming up on Saturday afternoon as they're back at home in the Division II playoffs for the first time in 7 years, and Scott Agnes just joined the program. I walked you down memory lane to give you some historical perspective in terms of what this Pacers season looks like amongst other teams that have had the bottom fall out after making NBA Finals, and there's usually a reason there, as in star player isn't back. The difference in those examples I cited earlier, those players were not coming back to those franchises. This one, he will a year from now. But we can talk Pacers. And again, Pacers fans, I would love to hear from you. What keeps you motivated knowing the unique and not fun circumstances that we're in right now? Where, again, there's no one to blame here other than Miles Turner. There's no one to blame here for this season just careening off the tracks the way in which it has. It's the injuries, man. And again, in theory, this team will largely be back, to what it was a year ago, with the exception of the center, in 26-27. And you may be bad enough in 25-26 to find a guy that can replicate his skill set in the draft. So Pacers fans, what keeps you motivated to watch and not changing the channel when the Pacers play? Because, again, we got so lucky and so spoiled last year, last spring, into June. It doesn't appear to be happening again the rest of this season into the spring. What keeps you motivated? Would love to hear from you on that front. Or if there's something else you want to talk about, now is the time. Open phone lines for the remainder of the show, 317-239-1070. Your telephone calls, your tweets are simply more of having a conversation with Eddie where he doesn't participate. We can go that way as well. 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. John is here at 3 o'clock, a rare studio appearance for John, and have our crosstalk segment. Now, normally I appear on Tuesdays at 3:30. I think John's going to have me on either next week or later this week, since I've been gas bagging it now for 2.5 hours with 30 more minutes left to go. Phone lines are open. Steve wants to chat up Pacers with me. Hello, Steve. How are you?
Hey, real good. Thanks for taking my call.
Of course.
So, as far as what to look forward to with the Pacers, given their dismal outlook for this year, and unfortunately I'm not seeing it yet. What I'd like to see is improvement across 3 players: Isaiah Jackson, Jarris Walker, and Furphy.
Yeah.
And either Furphy's hurt, the other 2 I'm not seeing it, because I think that's our opportunity to get back to the same, and God love us, even a better level if we have quality depth. And I'm just not seeing it right now.
Yeah, we're not seeing much of anything good right now with this team, Steve. Steve, thanks for the telephone call. I guess on Isaiah Jackson, again, in his defense, Achilles injury last year, he's a year back, he's still figuring it out. I don't think Isaiah Jackson is a starting caliber 5 in the NBA. I think he's an energy guy that plays 15 to 20 minutes a night for you at most. He is a backup big, and that is probably stretching it. But in the system the Indiana Pacers usually are designed to play, he can pull that role off. But obviously when it wasn't thought there would be much in the way of free agent moves, and Miles pulls a stunner, and the Bucks, cut and stretch Dame Lillard to make room for Miles Turner, and it catches the Indiana Pacers kind of holding the bag and nobody is out there to replace him, you find kind of a warm body that can shoot in Jay Huff, and that's the best that you can do. You just kind of shrug your shoulders and deal with it the best you can. So that is one of the reasons why I don't have a sense of optimism for this year. I think this is going to be a rough slog. But I also don't think I think you make a worse mistake by blowing it up or moving somebody else away. I think you can go find your 5 of the future where you are drafting, where you are likely to draft come June. Because, again, as compared to most teams that have a top 5 or a top 10 pick, you are not at a rebuild moment. No, you are at a find an asset moment. You literally need to find one guy because you feel you have all of the other pieces around that player. Now, Eddie had a scenario that didn't make the air, but figured it'd be a good time to have him share it with us. Because I said, all right, you draft the best available 5 or even kind of stretch 4.
Yep.
You think there's a different move you can make in terms of moving Mathurin. So explain.
Yeah, I think the more logical move in the Pacers position, Greg, is because when you're a small market team like the Pacers are, you can't afford to have a top pick and then trade it. You have to capitalize, especially when it's rich in those first 3 spots, whether it's Cam Boozer, the kid from Kansas, Darren Peterson, or
who, by
AJ,
the way, is not going to play tonight due to a hamstring injury.
Yeah, or AJ Dybansta, the kid at BYU, because those 3 guys are all projected to be, really good franchise cornerstone pieces that either A, can be the superstar for your team, or B, be a nice complement of a superstar to your team. And when you're looking at the timeline of things and trying to figure out, okay, how do they replace Pascal Siakam's production in the future, that could be a potential player if the Pacers are in the top 3 pick to replace him down the line, because it fits the timeline with Tyrese and the mold of this roster. And additionally, if you do have a top 3 pick, it gives you the capability of finding that immediate potential replacement for Mathurin, thus creates the opportunity to do a sign and trade, and then you can target whatever center you think would fit with this group of players on the roster next to Tyrese Halliburton.
So you use Mathurin as a tradable piece to bring back a big.
Yeah.
Also part of the equation for this basketball team. The rest of what you said, obviously, again, you're looking at individual development. The things that have you interested are Mathurin, and again, I differ with you on Jackson, but for me, those 3 guys that I'm like, okay, I want to see how this guy performs. Mathurin, Walker Furphy. And one of those guys has played 3 games. I lost track of how long Furphy played. It wasn't that much long, if that long at all, before he then got hurt. And in talking with Scott, it seems like it's a couple of weeks away. Other thing that could be on your radar tonight would be the latest release of the college football playoff rankings. I think safe to say Ohio State's going to stay 1. Indiana's going to stay 2. Texas A&M is going to stay 3. There are likely to be movement after that. You would think Alabama would drop but stay in the top 10 or 11. And frankly, because of the way the rankings work out, being in the top 10 is where you need to be, because spot 11 is going to the ACC champ, and spot 12 is going to whatever team from the group of 5 schools that avoids losing when they're in the number 12 spot. Because the last couple of times we've had these rankings, the team like, oh, this is the guy representing the group of 5. That team has blanked the bed and then no longer been in that position. So Indiana should be 2. I don't think there's much drama in that. And again, there are so many things that we talk about with Indiana football that you say it and you're like, did I just say that out loud and not getting laughed at? Like, Indiana is the sure thing. Indiana, you know exactly what to expect. But Indiana is getting all the attention. And Notre Dame just kind of ho-hum, taking care of business. And we said this after the first 2 games of the schedule. You lose to Miami by 3. You lose at home to Texas A&M by 1. Probably didn't grasp the season that Texas A&M would have when you lose that game in week 2. But you kind of said, you know what? If you look at the rest of the schedule, they should be able to win those games, right? And basically those games played out exactly as you thought. 2-win Purdue, 26-point win. You beat Arkansas so bad they fired their coach, beat them by 43. If you played Boise State 10 years ago, different story. Boise State now, you got them 21 points. NC State win by 29. Southern Cal, good, not great, beat them by 10. Boston College, they've won 1 game. You beat them by 15. Navy's good, but not CFP good. You beat them by 39. Pittsburgh, they're decent, won by 22. Here's what Notre Dame has left to ensure they're in the college football playoffs again. Now, are they a team that makes the national championship like last year? Probably not. But at least if you make the dance floor, you got an opportunity. They checked in at number 9. I would imagine they would be around the same general area this time around. But obviously you get to 8. Now you get a home game in South Bend for a second consecutive year. But if you've not been paying attention to Notre Dame, and frankly, unless you're a Golden Domer, I'm not sure you have been, because they've been good enough but not flying towards the top of the radar. They host Syracuse, who's 3-7 and 1-6 in conference play. Syracuse's lone league win, of all places, at Clemson. You're hosting Syracuse, who hasn't won a game since September 20th, the last time the Orange won a game. And then the game after that.
Was that Clemson?
That was Clemson, correct. So Syracuse's wins are UConn, Colgate, and Clemson. That's it. They were 3-1, now they're 3-7. Then Notre Dame goes and plays, and this kickoff time was announced yesterday. Lay off the Thanksgiving leftovers if you're an Irish fan on the Saturday of Thanksgiving, because you won't make the finale of that game. Irish go to Stanford and play at 10:30 on ESPN on Saturday night of Thanksgiving weekend. And the Cardinal are also 3-7. Now, much like it's jarring to think that Syracuse's last win is Clemson, Stanford's last win is Florida State. Part of the reason why the ACC isn't exactly going to get more than one team on the dance floor this coming year. So all that Notre Dame has to do to make the college football playoff for a second consecutive year is beat a pair of 3-7 football teams. One of them very late at night and very far away from home, but then again, Notre Dame plays a California game every year the way their schedule works out, either at USC or at Stanford. They should be used to it by now. But just something that knowing those college football playoff rankings are out there, yeah, Indiana's going to be number 2, but Notre Dame's going to be on the dance floor as well. Just something to think about and consider. We'll come back and wrap it up next. Again, phone lines remain open, 317-239-1070. We'll cross-talk it with JMV, and we'll catch all the things we missed on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Actually be a factual statement because Jake Query is back. Everybody deserves a little downtime, and wisely, Jake scheduled his around the Colts bye week. Colts return to practice tomorrow, and miraculously, Jake returns to the airwaves tomorrow as well. Eddie, what do you have lined up to celebrate Jake's return to the airwaves?
For Jake's return, we'll have Joel A. Erickson on tomorrow, Mike DeCourcy, and Matt Verderam. So we'll talk some college hoops and some Colts Chiefs as well tomorrow, and hopefully what is the top game on the schedule for the NFL this weekend.
You could also encourage Jake. I know how big of a soccer fan he is. Mike DeCourcy is very well versed in all things soccer. He's not just a college basketball nerd. He frankly writes about soccer and will do a lot of World Cup coverage for sporting news as well. So encourage Jake to talk about the world's game tomorrow.
I can try.
If you have the opportunity.
I can try.
The next time you'll hear me on these airwaves would be my Friday morning hit with the morning show fellas. But then after that, it would be Soccer Saturday. And I can tell you from an 11 perspective, things have been quiet just because of, they didn't make the playoffs, and the playoffs are wrapping up on Saturday. Tulsa and Pittsburgh, by the way, in our league, will be playing for a league championship. You can see that on CBS, so it's going to be on Channel 4 coming up Saturday at noon. All kind of Indy 11 player news next week. When I open it up for phone lines, sometimes friends just call the show. Like Tracy Forner. You now know him from Facebook, but back in the day, a television set near you, and like all former television anchors, once he gets off of TV, the man has not stopped growing his hair for the last 5 years. How's the beard, brother?
Actually, the beard, it's more salt and pepper. And I actually got a haircut. I got first real haircut in 4 years.
The fact that you treat haircuts like presidential administrations tells you that you are enjoying life away from television. How can I be of service to you in this afternoon, my good sir?
Well, very quickly, I woke up old, so I had arthritis surgery on my thumb, and I thought the best thing I could do for my wife during the 3 to 4 month recovery is make her not have to put up my sad little midlife crisis mini man bun. So I have a reasonable, borderline news anchor ready haircut, although I'm not doing that.
Brother, as a balding guy gets more balder by the day, any grief I give you about having a man bun is because I'm strictly jealous. So you rock that man bun as long as you can, Tracy.
Well, the man bun that I had did a good job at covering up where I was missing it.
Strategic. I get it. Yep.
I didn't go the JMV route. We grow here in Indy. They're lovely people. But first of all, it's always good to hear your voice. I love a guy that has a last name that's a verb and like a farm chore.
Absolutely. I come from a proud line of farmhands. Absolutely.
So I texted Derek yesterday. First of all, kudos to Query for taking time off during the bye week because he's putting the company in Query and Company. But when it's Schultz and Company and when it's Rakestraw and Company, there's an absolute void of archaic pop culture references because Jake's not there.
Okay,
He's
now earlier in the show, I made a reference to this Pacers season being like when Bobby Ewing stepped out of the shower. How about that?
Oh, all right. There you go.
Okay.
It was all a dream, man. It was all a dream. I told Eddie, I do have a question for you, and it's something through my very broadcast career, people are like, hey man, just do sports. I'm like, no, you don't. People don't understand what it takes to do sports, and no one does sports, particularly the variety of sports that you do. So it's an honest question. You're a husband and a father, and you have almost no downtime. When you have downtime, do you watch sports, and are you capable of turning off, of flipping that massive Rakestraw switch, and can you just watch, or is there something always grinding in the back of your brain as the penultimate broadcast sports professional that can do any sport? You're Indian Sister Rico, man. Just throw you into whatever it is.
Well,
I'm looking forward to your axe throwing and cornhole coverage coming up. But I mean, can you just be a spectator? Is it possible for you?
First of all, I would do axe throwing and cornhole toss if the money's right. I was trying to convince a guy. There's a company that does cornhole scoreboards here in town. I've been trying to have them do a tournament, have us produce it for years. So I'm working on that. But no, I can't turn it off in terms of when I'm watching a sporting event, and especially when I know I'm going to be back in this chair, because approaching things like a play-by-play guy or approaching things like a talk show host are different skill sets. I tend to have a little bit of both of those, so I can kind of do it. But in terms of when I have downtime, let me give you the best example. And it's about some of the things I talked about today on the show. So last night, Pacers are playing at 7 o'clock. I taped that game knowing I needed to talk about it to some degree on the show today. I actually watched it this morning before the kids got up and went off to school. And the reason being is that last night, actually my schedule changed. I now have Thursday night off. But it was going to be my only night at home for the evening without having to go out and do a game. So what was I doing last night? My son, who was on the spectrum, just as you have a wonderful child that is on there, I have one as well. I'm like, you know what? This is a great time for me to have some time with Jack. Jack wanted to be in the hammock, and instead of others would say, you know what? Let's put a jacket on. Not Jack. That's for wimps. So Jack takes a blanket with him, jumps in the hammock, and I was the engine that moved the hammock for an hour and a half while the Pacers game was being taped. And Tracy, I was in the absolute right place.
Yes, you were. That's like you're the little engine that could. That is amazing. No, you were exactly where you needed to be, and it's great to have that young person in your life that you're responsible that exists, and it gives you a little gravity, right?
Yes, it does. It gives you a great perspective of things. I gotta go because I'm meeting to John's talk time. Let's catch up soon. All right.
Give me. Can I have 10 seconds?
10 seconds.
Okay, I'm going to quote Russell Brand, which is something I never do, from the movie Get 'Em Greek. You, Greg Rakestraw, your daily to-do list must be a mind-baffling document.
It's more of just a series. It's more like a manifesto, just kind of notes all over the place. Thank you, Tracy. Appreciate that. Jake is back tomorrow. John is back in 5.5 minutes. It's 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.